Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day we talk with leaders about how technology is changing how we learn, how we work, how we live, and even transform our entire world. Now, two of my pet hates in this crazy old digital world is that the only articles we ever see on our news feeds are usually about how tech is usually quite sinister and going to take over the world, and those robots with red eyes from the Terminator movies and Skynet. In fact, speaking of movies, can you name me a movie based in the future where tech is not the bad guy? There's probably only two or three that I can think of off the top of my head, but if you can think of any, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or send me a DM or tweet on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes. Let me know. But another pet hate is the tech skills shortage that we're seeing all over the world right now, and how unsympathetic certain areas of my generation are towards kids who find themselves in a school or college studying for roles that don't even exist yet, because we're almost in this transitional period where older job roles are disappearing and new ones are just entering the market. And there's a lot of people doing great work behind the scenes to solve problems like this. So today, I want to restore the balance, because I recently read that Intel, Dell Technologies and the American Association of Community Colleges have announced the AI Incubator Network, which essentially is a new initiative from Intel's AI for Workforce program that is designing and building artificial intelligence labs right across the country and utilising the expertise and industry connections of America's community college system. And it's hoped that that partnership is going to open applications for community colleges by designing and building their own AI incubators as physical labs, all on virtual platforms or hybridized models. Sounds cool, right? And these are the kind of stories that you tune in for. I know that because I get your emails and DMs. So buckle up and hold on tight, because today I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Arizona, where Carlos Contreras, Senior Director of AI and Digital Readiness of the Americas region at Intel Corporation, he's waiting to speak with us, and he'll talk about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
My name's Carlos Contreras. I work for Intel Corporation. I'm the Senior Director of AI and Digital Readiness Programs, which means that I work with governments, educational institutions, professors, and students to get AI programs into schools and build out these super important digital readiness skills that everyone's going to need.
Fantastic. And I'm looking forward to finding out more about your incredibly cool work. But before we do, I always like to start the podcast by asking my guests, how did you get here? What's your origin story? Where did your passion for tech come from? And was there a moment that lit the spark in you and put you on the path that you're on right now?
So Neil, I grew up in a border town in Mexico, Nogales, and my dad was an electrical engineer. He worked in what are called maquiladoras, which are basically manufacturing companies. And I remember when I was about 6 years old, he worked for Motorola, and I remember seeing a silicon wafer. It was probably about 4 inches wide, and I thought that would look really cool in my bike because you said it's a mirror. And so I was constantly exposed to technology, to engineering. My grandfather was a trained engineer. My great-grandfather was a trained engineer. So I'm the youngest of 4 boys. So I was always kind of on that path to do this type of work. And for me, so I got an engineering degree, and then I got an MBA. I started working at Intel. I've been at Intel for about almost 26 years. And so when I started to kind of think about my future, I had an opportunity to go to Costa Rica and do an expat assignment, which was a fantastic experience. And when I came back from that, I kind of that was kind of one of my big goals, right? To do that, having grown up in a border town and seeing some of those expats come in and work with my dad. And one of the things that I kind of asked myself is like, how in the heck did I get here, right? Like, why did I get here? And I came back to education because I always felt like I was not the smartest kid. You know, I grew up with a lot of smart kids around, and I just had the opportunities that others didn't. And so I kind of switched careers. So I was in finance in the beginning of my career, and I switched to do this type of work. And I was very lucky that Intel kind of prioritizes this type of outreach work, right? To get more students interested in technology and to develop these types of skills.
Yeah, it's incredibly important and incredibly cool what you're doing there. And for people that are hearing about you for the first time, that path led you to Intel, as you've said. And can you tell listeners a little bit more about what you do at Intel right now and what you love about your work?
Yeah, so I get to kind of bring the future to these institutions, right? So yeah. I work on artificial intelligence, specifically around how do we help these community colleges create programs that are going to offer, these training opportunities for students and learners and adult learners. As you know, this technology is very, very disruptive. It's going to have an impact in terms of skills, and we're going to need to kind of learn how to use this technology and how to rescale. So I get to work with community college chancellors, professors, deans, and kind of break that paradigm that this technology is for, PhDs and doctoral students and universities, right? It really isn't anymore. It really is coming down to students that are going to be, radiologists, car technicians, mechanics, manufacturing, and all those folks get their training in community colleges. So it's in my day-to-day job that's kind of the data and the story that I share with the professors and the chancellors, and then I walk them through what Intel offers, which is professional development and curriculum, right, to implement these programs at their local community colleges.
And it's so important, everything that we're talking about here. I mean, I've thought for the last 3-4 years how difficult it is for kids now, because on one hand, we're told that there's this huge digital skills shortage right across every industry. And on the other side, we've got kids in schools that are trying to learn for jobs that don't actually even exist yet or will exist when they actually leave school. And one of the reasons I invited you on today was I read that Intel, Dell Technologies and the American Association of Community College have announced the AI Incubator Network, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a new initiative from Intel's AI for Workforce program that will design and build artificial intelligence labs right across the country by utilising the expertise and industry connections of America's community college system. But can you tell me more about that AI Incubator Network, what it means to you and your teams, and why it's such an exciting move?
Yeah, you're spot on, Neil, in terms of the intent of our program, which is really we want to connect our community colleges to their local industry. Yeah. This AI, AI technology is fairly new. A lot of small, medium-sized businesses don't really know what it does. The big companies do, right? They can afford to hire folks, data scientists, but it's really, at the end of the day, it's really the local industry connections that we're trying to get to through these community colleges. So we want to build this skill set at the community college that can reach out to industry and deliver to the local industry, trained workforce that they can use so that this technology can be implemented. Because at the end of the day, if you're manufacturing, for example, right, and if you don't have AI in your plan to use AI, you're not going to be competitive. So this becomes a competitiveness issue too for the local industries.
And I'm conscious we will have many people listening all over the world and a huge audience in the US. And if we've got anyone from a student to somebody running a community college, what kind of community colleges can join this AI Incubator Network, and what can they expect? Yeah,
we currently have a selection process, so we're partnering with the American Association of Community Colleges, which includes 1,200 community colleges. So we're running through a selection process. I think that would be kind of the place to reach out to, or at the end, I can kind of give our website and folks can reach out to us too. And so we're trying to open this up to anyone, right? The most important thing for community colleges is for them to develop a plan around how they're going to incorporate this curriculum into their existing, whether it's creating a new program, a new associate's degree program, or embedding some of these skills into an existing program, like a data analytics, cybersecurity, so forth and so on. And so we have a very much hands-on work with the colleges around just figuring out a plan too, because that's as important as the training itself. Because if there's no plan, there's no support. There's dedicated funding and resources to pull this off. Then professors are going to be kind of in a tough spot. And we've seen the community colleges kind of rally around a plan and rally around this program to offer it to their students.
And it's such an important topic because I spoke to a guest a few weeks ago and they were telling me how there are currently 3 million unfilled roles across Asia Pacific in cybersecurity alone because of the lockdown and people from overseas couldn't work there. And that's just cybersecurity in Asia Pacific. And we know that it's a global problem around tech skills shortage. So how important is addressing a tech skill shortage to you and your team at Intel? And how do you see an initiative like this helping students foster the skills needed for future jobs? Because that's where the magic happens, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's really about preparing students for these future jobs. And, the AI is, sometimes it's a dreaded around. It's going to automate everything. People's jobs are going to go away. And when I hear that, it's they're going to change. They're not, the tasks are going to change. The skills are going to change. And this is why this type of work is so important, right? Is to start reskilling folks, our workers, so they know how to use this technology. And our program is very much, it's not theoretical, it's very much industry examples, problems that you can see in industry and how you can solve them using artificial intelligence. And so we are constantly looking at adding more examples because this technology is becoming more and more pervasive in the different industry sectors.
And obviously, I know you can't reveal too much at the moment, especially because you're going through that selection process still. But how many colleges are you hoping to be working with?
We currently have about 30 colleges that we work with our program. So we're going to probably go up to 75 to 100 schools by the end of the year. And our goal for this program, for our AI for Workforce program, is to scale this program to all 50 states. So we want to be able to have at least one program in one AI program in every one of our states here in the U.S.
And another reason I was excited to get you on the podcast today was I recently read a 2021 EdScoop survey underwritten by Dell Technologies and Intel. And I think that it found that higher education officials believe that the demand for AI training is actually outpacing both supply and the current ability of higher education institutions to meet that demand. And I know you're going after fixing a lot of the insights that were found in that report, but did it initially surprise you?
It kind of did a little bit in terms of how big that question came up in terms of the survey, but it also, our experience has been, as we've talked to community colleges, we've kind of heard the same story. These colleges kind of understanding that they have to come up with a plan because this technology is coming, right? But not really knowing what to do or where to start. And this is kind of where I think, I'm very proud of our work of our team that we've been able to offer a solution in a starting point for these community colleges to get going on this technology. And as you mentioned, the cybersecurity example, right? These tech shortages are everywhere. and so it's a problem that we're kind of jumping into with an existing supply of talent, and now we have an AI supply of talent that's also going to make things tougher. So it's super important for industry and academia to collaborate on these types of programs.
And I know you're far too modest to bring this up, but before you came on the podcast, I was doing a bit of research on Intel, and I read that this commitment is part of Intel's 2030 goals and the company's dedication to using tech as a force for good. And for me personally, it was so refreshing to read that, because all aspects of technology, especially artificial intelligence, get so many negative headlines, and of course, bad news sells and good news doesn't. So we don't get to hear about good stories like this. So can you share an overview of those goals and what your grand vision is for the future?
Yes, absolutely. And so our 2030 goals are really about expanding access to digital readiness skills at the end of the day, because we feel that the more people are involved in using and creating the technology, the better the technology becomes. As you said, right, there's issues that are covered in the press in terms of bias and in terms of representation. And having a goal like this for us, it's one possible solution is to get more access to more people and to expand these types of programs to as many people around the world as we can. And we have a goal of 30 by 2030, 30 million learners, 30,000 institutions in 30 countries, and we're well in our way of meeting those goals.
And I'm curious, as someone that's working right in the heart of the industry, and you're trying to use technology for the greater good and help kids get into work and fill these unfilled roles, what do you think when you're browsing down your newsfeed and see yet another Terminator robot with red eyes and horror stories of artificial intelligence and Skynet? Are we going to move past that, do you think, and realise it's not about competing for machines and competing for AI for roles, but actually complementing each other? Because again, that's where the magic is, but we don't get to read those stories. So I'm curious what you think when you read articles like that.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's clickbait, right? For some of these articles, that type of stuff is it attracts eyeballs. I kind of look at what's going on, right? Just one example, a couple of examples of AI, and I think it has to do, Neil, with people they don't think about it in terms of interacting with the technology yet, because it's not quite day to day. Although it probably is, people just don't realize it. But if you drive a newer car, for example, right, you have driver assist technology, right, that keeps you safe and drifting, not drift into other lanes or hit cars in front of you, right? And it's not taking the human out; it's helping driver be better by giving them signals. We see a lot of examples like these emerging in the health field, especially around images and being able to identify for the doctor, right? Being able to identify, for example, images and cancer, possible cancer spots, right? So this is about enhancing the quality, of the individual by using technology. And I'm very hopeful that we'll see more of those examples. But I'm also a realist, and I know that we're not going to continue to see some of those doom and gloom articles pop up.
Yeah, and I think you're doing exactly the right thing here. When we start seeing those unfilled tech roles and tech skill shortages disappear and being filled by a new generation of kids that are getting out there and in the workplace and changing things for the better, that's when the cool stuff will happen. But I think that's a beautiful moment to end on. But before we do, we've come full circle now. We began talking about your origin story. But as we come full circle, I'm going to ask if there's a song, piece of music, movie, book, or anything that has inspired or helped you in your career. Do you have a choice and a story behind it? And we'll leave the listeners on an inspirational note today.
Well, as I mentioned, I have older brothers, and so I was exposed to a lot of music at a young age. And I'm a big Beatles fan, and I love their evolution, their musical evolution, their journey that they took, and enjoy kind of hearing each of their albums. And they could have taken it safe, right? And they didn't. They took a lot of risk, and the creativity that they have and that they displayed. And so I kind of go back to these types of changes, in disruptive changes that come along, and how easy it is to kind of keep doing what you're doing before. And then I just go back to the arts and see somebody like, a great artist, and showing you that to take risk and to continue to grow, which at the end of the day, that's what we all have to do in this new world we live in. Just continue to grow.
And what would the one Beatles song you'd add to our Spotify playlist?
Oh, I love
a long list there, isn't there?
Yeah, I know. It's tough to pick one. I like Rubber Soul. That's one of my favorite albums, and I love the "In My Life" song, because it's beautifully grounded in where you came from, but also where you're going.
Absolutely. Well, I'll get that on our Spotify playlist. I was wondering if you're going to go down the I Am the Walrus or Octopus's Garden route there, but that is much more fitting. But before I let you go, for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about the work that you're doing, everything we talked about, what's the best starting point?
You can go to our website, to intel.com /digital readiness, and you can see all these wonderful programs that we have around digital readiness. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. Just hit me up, and we can connect.
Well, I love what you're doing here at Intel, especially how you're going to expand that AI for workforce program, spurring an almost national dialogue and bringing coordinated resources to the broader community college system. I always say at the end of every episode, technology works best when it brings people together, and that's what you're doing here. So I applaud you for that, and also for sharing your origin story and leaving us with a classic Beatles track too. I think we covered so much there, but thanks again for joining me today, Carlos.
Thank you, Neil. It's been wonderful talking to you.
As I said at the very beginning of the podcast, these are the kind of stories I want to hear more about. Yes, there are problems with AI, bias, etc., but it's not a binary choice between good and bad. And we need to hear more stories like this, more nuance, and promote the great work that some are doing out there. That's what I try and do on every episode of this podcast, restore the balance with some good old-fashioned positivity. So whatever work you're doing, if you've got a question, you want to share your story, or if you want to come on this podcast, whatever it might be, please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk if you'd like to work with me. I work with CEOs, leadership teams on ghostwriting, thought leadership articles, business blogs, and also help businesses launch their own podcast too. And finally, if you did enjoy today's podcast and you do enjoy a more positive take on the world of tech, please leave a rating and review on wherever you listen to this podcast. Other than that, I'll return again tomorrow. I've got another guest lined up. We'll explore a different area of how technology is transforming how we learn, work, live, and even our world. So thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.